Hello, hello. Welcome to another Coffee and Craft podcast episode. This week's is a bit more of a practical one because we're going to be talking about not one but two updates that Etsy are bringing in that could well affect you if you sell on the platform. So here we go. Actually, no, here we don't, because I do just want to quickly say, very quickly, thank you to everyone who signed up for the course that I released last week or supported me in any way, shape or form. Just even with your cheerleading, it meant a lot. Thank you very much. Okay, sappy stuff over. I'm just very grateful. Okay, right. But as promised, let's jump straight in. I have coffee and I will keep you company while you craft or work. Just as a bit of a warning, I can't guarantee that it won't get a little bit ranty later because the responses to one of these updates kind of pissed me off a little bit, but I'll get to that. The first one is more for the UK sellers amongst us. So if you're not from the UK, just hang tight. This is quite boring, so I'll cover it quickly. HMRC, Humrook, the tax people here in the UK, they are requiring information from Etsy in what the media here have described as a tax crackdown. So dramatic. So essentially, from the 1st of January, platforms like Etsy, but not limited to Etsy, have to share seller information as part of this whole crackdown. And it's essentially to crack down on tax evasion, which is fair enough. Here in the UK, you are allowed to make up to, I think it's £1,000 before you need to register as self-employed or declare it. And this is just to give people who just want to sell, I don't know, their kids' old clothes or maybe some unwanted furniture on Facebook Marketplace, that sort of thing. You know, it's not to get everybody, but it's to get the people who have been starting a business and making, you know, a fair amount of income and not declaring it. And this also makes it fairer for traditional businesses that have to deal with stricter tax law and stuff than people who tend to sell online. So this is all fair enough and common sense. So I think the criteria on Etsy at least, is that you have to be selling 30 items or more over the course of a year, or making, what was the figure? Now I know I just said £1,000, but I think the figure that I found was £1,700, and that was converted from euros. Now the reason for this is that this is not just something that the UK government have come up with. They have signed into something. Wait 1 second, I have written it down. New rules brought in by OECD, which stands for the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. And what this does, it now allows the UK government to get this information from platforms that are not based within the UK, because they couldn't do that before. So things like Etsy, they can now get this information from these platforms too, which again, as I say, fair enough. So what they've said is that they will start sharing this information, I think, from the end of January 2025 for the past year. So everybody has time. There will be no excuses of, oh, I didn't know. I'm sure there will be some people who try to pull that one. But they're doing this now and they're telling everybody now. So everybody has plenty of time to get their financial house in order. So if you are starting up a business, or if you have started up a business and you haven't yet registered as self-employed with HMRC, now would be the time. This thing won't affect the majority of us, because if you are a business and you are selling on Etsy, I'm willing to bet you've already set up as self-employed and already doing your self-assessments and stuff, and hopefully your bookkeeping. So yes, for the majority of us, this is just like, yep, obviously. But some people clearly have been a bit naughty. Obviously this is to do with UK people, but I am wondering if it might at least go some way to putting off certain sellers on places like Etsy. You know, the opportunistic, spammy ones. I don't know how much of a difference it will make, because as I say, this particular segment, I'm talking about people within the UK. I don't know if this also applies to other countries within the EU. So I don't know if it's going to have all that much of a difference, but you know what? Every little helps. So listen, if the rest of us have to do our taxes every year and declare everything that we make, you can too. I would get out my tiny violin, but I can't even be bothered to look for it in this instance. Speaking of tiny violins, the second update, and I'm going to try and get through this without ranting. Etsy are no longer sharing buyer emails with public APIs, unless they're necessary to fulfill orders. On the 4th of January, I got an email from Etsy telling me, what did they tell me? We're giving you a heads up about this change because it looks like you've used one of these third-party services in the last 60 days. The third-party service in question was a keyword research tool that I used. But what I found interesting was the used in the last 60 days part, because I haven't used it for well over a year. I have purchased from Etsy though in the last 60 days. Now that I'm not going to name the company, but they have apparently come out and said that they never use buyers' email addresses. So I'm assuming therefore that they just get the email addresses as part of a package from Etsy. However, that's not my issue. My issue, as normal, is with Etsy. What were they doing sharing this information with third parties in the first bloody place? It's been flat out illegal, UK, EU, etc., since 2018. Yes, I know, Etsy is an American platform. However, they do business within the EU, and therefore they are bound by EU law. EU law such as GDPR. And like I said, this has been going on since 2018, just 6 years at the time of filming, so not new. Do you remember I said I was going to try and not get angry about this? I haven't even gotten into it, guys. I haven't even gotten into the bit that makes me really, really angry. So let's just recalibrate. Now I should just quickly point out, because I know that someone's going to get in the comments to say it. Since the UK left the EU, yes, our particular regulations are slightly different, but honestly, they are so similar. The changes that have been made have been minuscule. So our current rules here in the UK are pretty much the same as EU's GDPR laws. My point is that they are strict AF, as they should be, because people's email addresses, and I'm going to say this a lot, are personal information. You need people's consent to use them. I don't care where you are. I don't care if you're not living in the EU. Oh, a kite. You better not be going for my chickens. Back to it. I don't care where you are. I don't care where you're from. If you are going to use an email address from someone who is in the EU or in the UK, you have to listen to it too. And by it, I mean GDPR, which stands for, let's see if I can remember it, General Data Protection Regulation. Yes. And why that is burned into my brain, apart from the fact that I need to pay attention and abide by these rules as well. When they first started becoming a thing, I was working for another company at the same time as building my own business, and we dealt with a lot of personal information. We had 2 years. GDPR came into play in 2018, but 2 years previous to that, companies were given plenty of time to get their houses in order, and we had our department alone had so many meetings and interactions with the whole corporation's legal department to make sure that we were compliant. And that took 2 years, and I just remember it ramping up and just becoming this huge overwhelming thing closer to the date. But yes, it's kind of burned in my brain. But I do remember thinking that it's actually, for a small business such as myself at the time, because I was also doing this, but thinking how it would apply to me building my own business. And I realised that it was actually really easy to stay compliant. You've just got to think of 2 things: consent and proof. There is more to it than that. You have to be able to tell people how you're going to be using their information, how you're going to be storing their information, etc., etc. If you're going to send people email addresses, what they can expect from you. There is more to it. So don't just take this as legal advice. Do your own homework, because your business is your business, not mine. But I just remember thinking that at the crux of it, if I just made sure that I got people's consent to send them emails and that I could prove that, then for the most part I was covered. Now, I'm talking about GDPR, but countries around the world have their own laws. And even in America, California, they have a version of it. What's it called? Is it it's CC? It's PA or TA? Back to the notes. I'm not really referring to them as much as I should be today. CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act. So this is not a European thing or a UK thing or a random country over there thing. This is across board, and it's only getting more so with every year that goes. I think that regardless of what the law is where you are, you should be just assuming that everyone everywhere has the strictest laws possible, and just thinking about consent and proof in mind whenever you try and build your email list, because that way you can't go wrong. Or at least it's very difficult to. All right, now we're going to get into the bit where I might start to get a bit angry. Because first of all, I was a bit annoyed, but sadly not surprised that despite these rules being in place for 6 years, Etsy have only just started thinking, ooh, maybe we shouldn't be sending out buyers' email addresses to third-party companies that don't need it. If that hadn't annoyed me, reading the response from Etsy sellers to this update, that did it. That really did it. The ignorance and entitlement on display. And when I say ignorance, I mean willful ignorance, which is the worst kind. Because fair enough, you can't know what you don't know. But when you do know and you still think like, I'm not listening, that's willful ignorance. A lot of people have been trying to be clever because they're aware of all of these rules and regulations, so they try to get around them. The moment you try to be clever and get around anything, that's when you're flirting with boundary crossing, and you need to be so careful of that. I have had emails in the past, and now I know, I understand more about some of the companies involved and how they use the email addresses. I can now understand this. But I did see a pattern of some companies. So I had a couple of Etsy sellers based in America and here in the UK, so frankly they should have known better, basically getting into my inbox to ask me if I would like to sign up to their email list. You've already done it. You're already in my inbox. You need permission to send anything. Again, if you're selling anything on Etsy, you are not allowed to use the email addresses. You're not allowed to send people emails to their inbox, and you're not allowed to take those email addresses and stick them on your mailing list. Goes against terms of service for Etsy. Anyway, you get my point. Under no circumstances do you use people's email addresses that you get when somebody places an order with you on Etsy. You just don't. Full stop. Period. If somebody has made a sale on Etsy, they have given Etsy permission to send them emails, not you. You are an independent seller. You are not given, you cannot, don't do it, you cannot. Okay, Kim, I think they've got the message. I mean, I'm hoping I'm preaching to the choir and that most of you are just sat there going, we know, Kim, we agree, Kim, don't get angry at us, Kim. I'm not getting angry at you. But let's just say you have been doing this and you didn't realise, you genuinely didn't realise, and you're like, oh my God. So how do you now build up your mailing list? Basically just think consent and proof. You need people's consent to email them. How do you do that? A sign-up page so that they can opt in. That's actually the legal term, opting in. People have to give you permission to use their email addresses because, again, it's their information. You are not entitled to it. You want a random analogy? Because that's what I usually do. Well, here's one. People tend to see emails as a pretty stone on a beach. I like that. I'm bringing it home. Only it's not like that. It's like someone holding a pretty stone that's theirs on a beach, if you must, and someone going, I want that, I take it. You need to ask someone if you can take that pretty pebble. And if they go, yeah, here, then you can take it home with you. Otherwise, you need to be prepared for the answer to be, no, it's my pebble. I'm just trying to get across the concept of ownership, because I think some of you need to hear it, unfortunately. You need consent, permission. And the flip side to that you need to be able to demonstrate that you have consent, permission. The good news is that it is so easy to do that with a bloody sign-up page. And for the people who say, well, this is going to be so much harder for me to build my mailing list, well, tough. And also, I would argue, who's going to be a more warm lead to sell to? Who's more likely to convert? Someone that hasn't given you permission to email them and probably doesn't even know that you've added them to your mailing list, or someone who has gone to the effort to put their information onto a sign-up page and press submit. Because I can promise you, I have never stayed on a list that I have been added to manually, ever. Not once. I have only ever opened those emails to go in and unsubscribe. And again, to those people that think that sending an email saying, would you like to opt into my mailing list is okay, it's not. It is not. You need permission to send anybody an email about anything. Now, if somebody buys from your website and you need to send them say, for example, a confirmation email, that's fine, because if they've bought from your website, they have put their details in and they are giving you permission to contact them about an open transaction. You don't, though, even then, get to take their email and automatically add it to a mailing list. You can send people emails about open transactions, but once the transaction is over, to send people emails outside of an open transaction, you need permission. It's so simple, folks. If people are overcomplicating it, it's because they are trying to be willfully ignorant, because they're trying to get around things, and that's a red flag. So if that's you, please stop doing that. There's no justification for it. There's no excuses. So yes, not only do you need to get consent and be able to prove that you've had consent just to keep yourself on the right side of the law, you also want to do it for your mailing list and to make sure that it is as high quality as possible. My mailing list is so small. Doesn't matter. Nobody knows, because nobody knows my numbers. Why? Because they're private. Nobody sees them. So it's not a vanity metric. If you're trying to build yourself an email list, don't take people's emails off Etsy. Goes against the terms of service and a whole load of laws. Consent and proof. Sign up forms. Do it the right way, or not at all. Just stop looking at email addresses as numbers and just try and look at it as the people behind them. And if you do want to hear more about emails, I go into it in a bit more detail, but it's pretty much the same as what I've already said here in this video, which I made like 2 years ago. And the information still stands, so you can go and head on over, and it's a lot less ranty than this video. And I need to get a new coffee. This one's gone cold, which is worse than having no coffee. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.